Hello friends, I am Kausik and you are watching tutorials in English literature. In today's video, I shall continue the discussion of the summary of Williamcongreve's famous play The Way of the World. Today's lesson will be a detailed discussion and analysis of the Act 4 of this play. I have already discussed in detail the summary of the plot of Act 1, Act 2 and Act 3 of this play, and I have also discussed the characters of this play. There are other lectures on Williamcongreve and an introduction to The Way of the World. So if you have not watched those videos yet, please first make sure to watch those videos. Link of each and every videos have been provided in the description. Let's start today's discussion. The Act 4 begins again at Lady Wishfort's house. In the first scene of Act 4, we find Lady Wishfort with her servant Foible. They are waiting for Sir Roland, the fictitious uncle of Mirabell. We have already known that this role will be played by Waitwell, who is Mirabell's servant. So as soon as Lady Wishfort notices a carriage is approaching towards her house, she asks Foible whether her nephew Waitwell has greeted Millamant as she ordered. Foible tells her that Wilful is getting drunk, and then Lady Wishfort orders Foible to call Millamant down, and she herself goes out to talk with Waitwell. She instructs Foible that Foible must see Wilful to meet Millamant, and then Foible must not delay to find out Lady Wishfort in her room so that she doesn't have to stay with Sir Roland for a long time. So this is Lady Wishfort's plan to spend a little time with Sir Roland to excite his interest. And here the first scene ends. In the second scene we find that Foible finds out Millamant in the hall, and there she is pacing and reciting a poetry. Mrs. Fennel is also present there. So Foible tells Millamant that Mirabell has been waiting for her for half an hour and he wants to talk with her in private, but Lady Wishfort has ordered her to meet Waitwell. Then Millamant replies that Foible should tell Mirabell that she is busy now and he should come again another time. And then Foible leaves them. After some time, Foible comes again and tells Millamant that Sir Wilful is coming. Then Millamant quickly changes her mind and he says Foible to tell Mirabell that she will meet Mirabell now, and she requests Mrs. Fennel to entertain her cousin Sir Wilful. But Mrs. Fennel curtly thanks Millamant for giving her the opportunity to be a proxy of Millamant, but she denies to entertain Sir Wilful because she has her own business to look after. So here we find that Mrs. Fennel is loyal to Mirabell, not to Millamant, and she feels impatient with the way Millamant harasses Mirabell. So here the second scene ends. In the third scene we find that Mrs. Fennel is just about to leave the house. At that time she meets Sir Wilful and she greets him and tells him that this is his best opportunity to Milament, and she encourages him that he should do it now. Willful says that she feels nervous, scared and shy, and he needs drink now, and he will be ready another time to propose Milament, though his aunt has already ordered him to do so, and he is now ready to leave again. But Mrs. Fennell catches him, and she drags him almost and pushes him into the room with Milament and locks the door. And here the third scene ends. In the fourth scene, we find that Milament is still pacing, walking in the room, reciting poetry. She is trying to memorize a poem, and Sir Wilful is calling Mrs. Fennell through the door to let him out. She is really afraid of Milament. He is completely uncomfortable in presence of Milament. Then he tries to make small talk with her, and she continues to recite poetry. Then suddenly Milament praises loudly Suckling and his poetry, but Wilful cannot realize she is reciting poetry, and he responds that he can speak only in plain English. Then Milament asks him why he has come, and then Wilful replies that he wants to know whether she will walk with him this evening. Then Milament replies that she hates walking, and she hates everything that is associated with country. That means countryside, village, and she also hates the town. Wilful becomes happy that Milament is now conversing with him, and he laughs that Milament hates both the country and the town. Milament also laughs and tells him that he should leave her now with her own thinking and help him to find out another exit of that room. And here the fourth scene ends. As Sir Wilful leaves the room of Milament, Mirabell silently enters into her room, and here the Act 4 Scene 5 begins. Mirabell begins to recite the next lines from the poem that Milament has been trying to memorize. The name of the book is The Story of Phoebus and Daphne Applied, and the lines that Mirabell recites is like Daphne, see, as lovely and coy. Here this poem becomes very important because here Daphne is pursued by Phoebus, and for that reason Daphne has been transformed, has been metamorphosed into a laurel tree. So here we find that a woman is losing her identity because of male pursuit, and this lack of identity that Milament fears becomes the main concern of this scene. This scene is famously known as the Provisosim because here Milament provides few provisos to retain her identity as a free woman even after her marriage. Mirabell also offers his conditions to balance her demands, and for that reason this scene is famously known as the Proviso scene. In the Proviso scene, Congreve presents Mirabell and Milament as models in the lifestyle of the period and highlights the qualities essential for the stability of conjugal relationship. They argue in a humorous manner about a vision of marriage free from the hypocrisy that surrounds them. Here the lovers face each other not as sentimental lovers but as rational human beings, because it is only on the basis of reason, unclouded by emotion, that the firm foundation of marriage can be built. Provisosim begins with reference to Daphne, who loses her own identity, as I have told, in a love chase and transformed into a laurel tree. This Greek myth suggests Millamant's fear that surrender to marriage means loss of identity. Millamant loves Mirabel, but like Harriet in The Man of Maud, she fears that marriage will convert Mirabel into a complacent husband and reduce her into a mere wife. Her anxiety guides in all she says and does. So Millamant makes it clear that her dear liberty should be preserved. She says that I will never marry unless I am first made sure of my will and pleasure. She bargains for her freedom, to sleep as long as she pleases, to meet whom she pleases, to write and receive letters without interrogations, and to converse according to her own taste. More importantly, she requires the space for a private existence. She says, "To my closet inviolate, to be sole empress of my tea table, which you must never presume to approach without first asking leave." So Millamant also denounces hypocrisy, and she demands that she would not like to be addressed by such names as wife, spouse, my dear, joy, jewel, love, sweetheart, and the rest of that in which men and their wives are so famously familiar. She also expresses her utter disdain to visit public places together, that means the park, St. James Park, only to catch the eyes of others. Mirabel's proviso reflect the similar concerns with the working details of a meaningful private relationship. He qualifies and limits Millamant's demands so that her liberty never deviates into license. But at the same time, he does not want to be beyond measure enlarged into a husband, to impose authority. He demands that Millamant should not be in company of any woman who has a notorious background or who indulges in scandalous activities, as Mrs. Marwood here we find. The next condition is that she should not use the artificial things to cover her real appearance, like mask, excessive makeup, as we find in the activities of Lady Wishford, who uses excessive makeup to repair her old age wrinkles. Mirabel also denounces the tight dresses that a woman should not wear during pregnancy. So these conditions are set down by them, confirm the sincerity of their motives and their wish to live a married life, resisting shallowness or affectations of their contemporary society. So here we should note one thing, that Mirabel's provisos that he limits on Millamant suggests that he is a very experienced man. He is not against the liberty of women, because the society was changing. The political society, the political world is also changing. We know that in Middle Ages, king was the sole authority and subjects had to follow his each and every order. But before the Restoration begins, we find the theories, political theories of John Locke, who insists upon the consensual government. the contractual document that should exist, and king should rule according to the permission of parliament. King should consult with parliament, and this political theory which brings a change in the concept of monarchy was reflected also in the house. In the house, which is a metaphor for state, husband is the king and he dominates over the women so that they do not become adulterous, immoral. But he himself may be an immoral man. So this concept was changing and women were now urging for freedom. And even in the Restoration age, there was also change in the structure of the house. We find that Millamant demands for a room of her own where she can spend her time, where she will be queen, the sole authority. So these changes are reflected in this scene. And above all, we find here two lovers who are quite different from the other pair of lovers in this drama, and Congreve's hope is in them. This scene of courtship is preceded by and followed by a pair of scene of courtship, but in comparison to this scene, these two scenes are quite humorous and funny, and it suggests the quality, the superiority of Mirabell and Millamant in comparison to other pair of lovers that we find here. This scene is followed by the humorous scene of Lady Wishfort's courtship to Sir Rowland, and it is preceded by the humorous scene of Sir Wilful's courtship to Millamant. So here the scene 5 of Act 4 ends. Mrs. Fainall enters into the room and Millamant looks to Mrs. Fainall and asks for advice. Should she marry Mirabell? She admits that she really wants to. Mrs. Fainall agrees that she should. Millamant, however, cannot say the 3 little words to Mirabell, so she says instead, I will endure you. Mrs. Fainall tells her to tell him in plain terms how much he means to her, but Millamant does not. She tells him not to kiss her or thank her for the engagement. Millamant's fear independence limits her ability to express tenderness. She still believes that admitting her love to Mirabell, even at her engagement, would be a sign of weakness. Mrs. Fainall, watching this exchange, is probably highly annoyed with Millamant for still playing hard to get. Then Mrs. Fainall interrupts the happy couple to tell Mirabell that he has no time to talk or stay with Millamant. Her mother is coming and will be enraged if she sees him in the house. She also reveals that things seem to be going well between Sir Rowland and Wishfort. She urges Mirabell to slip out of the back and wait for news from Fievel, and then Mirabell departs. So we find that Mrs. Fainall is protective of Mirabell and he is informed about the going on in the rest of the house by her, and she keeps Mirabell focused and determined to achieve his goal. It also brings the audience back to the realization that even as the marriage between Mirabell and Millamant is looking safe, Marwood and Fainall's plot to thwart Mirabell's plot is ongoing. So here the scene ends and the next scene, that means scene 7, begins. So once they are alone, Mrs. Fainall tells Millamant that Wilful has gotten so drunk and noisy that her mother had to leave Sir Rowland's side to go out and quiet him. She adds that Wilful was quarrelling with Petulant the last time she saw him. Millamant, totally ignoring everything that Mrs. Fainall has just said, admits to Mrs. Fainall that she loves Mirabell violently. Mrs. Fainall has reached the limits of her patience with Millamant. She bluntly points out how lucky Millamant is to be engaged to Mirabel rather than forced to marry Sir Wilful. So here 7th scene ends and now begins the Act 4 scene 8. A drunken Witoot joins the woman in the parlour. He reveals that Wishfort came in and stopped the fight and the drinks. Millamant asks him what is the dispute about, and he says that there was no real dispute because both men were too angry to do or say anything to the other. The argument is a testament to the foolish nature of the three men involved. That their drunkenness also reveals their immaturity. So here this scene ends and now begins the Act 4 scene 9, and we now find Petulant. He is also drunk, joins the woman and Witoot in the parlour. He has just made up with Wilful and has come to tell Millamant that she must decide right then whether she will have him, Petulant, as a lover or not. A gentleman would easily realize that a state of drunkenness is not a good time to profess love to a lady, nor demand that she tell him whether he stands a chance. Now it's become clear that Wilful and Petulant were arguing about Millamant. Petulant tells her that he was defending her beauty to Wilful. But after Millamant refuses to accept or encourage his love, Petulant tells her to fight for her own face next time and informs his companions he is going to bed with his maid, and then Petulant exits. So we find that neither Petulant nor Sir Wilful ever stood a chance of marrying Millamant. It makes their engagement, argument and their gravity about the topic all the more hilarious because they could never hope to understand Millamant, who of course is now already engaged. So, Mrs. Fennel then asks Witoot how the three men came to be so drunk and start arguing in the first place. Witoot tells her that Fennel caused them to get drunk as a part of a plot to get rid of Sir Roland and later snuck off. Witoot's comment here again makes clear that Fennel's plot is in full effect. The seeming happy ending between Millamant and Mirabel is not yet clear-cut. The way of the world is still very threatful. So here the scene 9 ends. In the next scene, we find that Wishfort joins Millamant and Mrs. Fennel and Witoot. She has dragged away a very drunk Wilful to propose to Millamant. Wishfort yells at Wilful to behave himself, warning that Millamant will never have him in this condition. Wilful responds by accusing his aunt of withholding her liquor from him. He hands her a purse of money so he can have more wine. He sings a drinking song and promises her he will marry his cousin if she requires him. The third proposal of the night for Millamant is arguably the worst. Not only is Wilful being made to propose against his will by his aunt, but Wishfort tries to smooth over Wilful's outrageous behavior, saying that he has been drinking to her health. Wilful affirms this and tells Millamant that if she is ready to marry him, he is ready too, even if she is not a virgin. If she doesn't want to marry him, he tells her that they should all have another drinks. So despite Wilful's antics and Wishfort's effort, the prospect of Wilful's marrying of Millamant is quite bad. And we find that his offering, his proposal is in a stark contrast to that of Mirabel. So Millamant is completely disgusted and asks her aunt to be excused before she faints from Wilful's stench of alcohol. She urges Mrs. Fennel to live with her. The two women exit, leaving Wishfort behind with Wilful and Witoot. And here the scene 10 ends. In the next scene we find that Wishfort, exasperated with Wilful, tells him he stinks and get out of her sight. Meanwhile, Foible arrived. She whispered in Wishfort's ear that Sir Roland is growing impatient, waiting for her return. So Wishfort now begs Witwoud to look after Sir Wilful. And here this scene ends. And now a very important humorous scene, scene 12 begins. So Wishfort now rejoins Waitwell, who is disguised as Sir Roland, in her dressing room. She apologizes for her absence and tells him that they should act more casually with each other now that they are better acquainted. They begin to speak of their plans to marry. Wishfort at first suggests they wait at least 2 days before getting married in order to be decent. But Sir Roland claims that he will die of a broken heart if she forces him to wait so long. He admits that he also wants to marry her to gain revenge against Mirabel. Sir Roland's eagerness to marry her makes Wishfort feel flattered. When Wishfort tells about all the ways that Mirabel has wronged her, Waitwell pretends to be angered by the news and vows to kill Mirabel. Wishfort urges him to reconsider murder and instead suggests that he starve Mirabel by disinheriting him. So here we can clearly remember that this word is actually a foible. So Wishfort has adopted word for word Foible's suggestion to starve rather than kill Mirabel. She has adopted here Foible's wit as her own. So Sir Roland quickly agrees to follow her plan instead. So now everything seems to be going perfectly with Mirabel's plot. And here this scene ends. At the beginning of scene 13, we find that Foible suddenly arrives in the dressing room and interrupts the exchange between Sir Roland and Wishfort. She informs Wishfort that the dancers hired to entertain Roland have arrived and one of them has a letter which she must deliver to Wishfort herself. Wishfort excuses herself and exists. So here we find a more dramatic irony in which Foible is dutifully delivering the very letter, the letter which is written by Mrs. Marwood and which is about to reveal that she and Waitwell are tricking Wishfort. And now begins the scene 14. So alone with his wife, Waitwell turns to Foible and complains about his job playing Sir Roland. He begs for a drink. Foible teases him for being so easily tired out by painting his love and lying to a lady. Waitwell tells her that Wishfort is antidote to desire and that Foible herself will suffer for it. He says that he has no more energy and is ready to stop pretending to be Sir Roland. So Waitwell and Foible enjoy a private moment here. They are eager to be done with Mirabel's scheme so they can enjoy each other's company in a simple way and the pleasures of life as husband and wife. Meanwhile, for the audience, this seems clearly to be the calm before a storm. And now begins the scene 15. So Wishfort returns holding an unopened letter from the dancer. She tells Sir Roland that she will open the letter with his permission and in front of him as a show of her loyalty. She offers to burn it without reading it if it would make him feel better. However, she tells him he has no cause to be jealous because the letter is in a woman's hand. So Wishfort is the opposite of Millamant. She symbolizes the old ways of understanding relationship between men and women. She is submissive and wants only to please her lover, unlike Millamant who demands her independence at the expense of Mirabel's feelings. So Foible instantly recognizes the handwriting of Mrs. Marwood and knows that it can contain nothing good. She whispers to Waitwell to take it from Wishfort. Sir Roland exclaims that he recognizes the handwriting and that the letter is from his nephew Mirabel. Wishfort is now happy to see him openly jealous. She tries to reassure him that she will answer the letter writer with a frank decline for further communication. So she opens the anonymous letter and begins to read its content to Roland. She reads that Roland is not a real person and is shocked. The foible exclaims to herself that the plan is ruined. Waitwell intervenes very well. He is still pretending to be Sir Roland. He grabs the letter and begins to read it aloud to prevent Wishfort from reading more. Foible, encouraged by this, quickly whispers to him to convince Wishfort that the letter is from Mirabel. He does so, and Wishfort begins to believe Sir Roland. Waitwell tells Wishfort that he has other letters in the same hand that were clearly written by Mirabel. Foible interrupts to explain how lucky it was that Sir Roland is here tonight. She tells Wishfort that she thought she saw Mirabel in the house this evening, who probably is trying to find Millamant. Wishfort believes Foible and tells her that she remembers that her niece left rather quickly when Wilful was proposing to her. Foible quickly lies that she didn't give Wishfort the news earlier because she didn't want to upset her while she was with Sir Roland. Sir Roland cuts off the dialogue between the women. He vows to kill Mirabel then and there with his pistol. Wishfort begs him not to break the law. She fears that he will be killed if he and Mirabel should duel. She takes matters into her own hands and offers to go find out what's happened from her niece. She accepts Roland's offer to give her his black box, which contains the deeds of his estate and fortune, as a sign of his fidelity, loyalty and love to her. He then asks her if she will accept his proposal of marriage tonight, and she delightedly accepts, and he leaves to get the documents. So here we find Foible and Waitwell have somehow shaped the plot of Mirabel, and here the Act 4 ends. So that's all for today. If you like this video, I request you to share it with your friends and show some love in the form of like. And if you are new to this channel, I request you to subscribe to this channel because I upload quality content regularly. Thank you for watching.